We are now into November. We are almost done with 1996, so we'll have to say goodbye to 96 soon, but we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. We'll go ahead and start with the first head-to-head, November 4th, 1996. Nitro opens up. Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko welcome us to the show, and we also see Sting watching from the rafters as well, and the Giant and Ted DiBiase are out here as well, looking up to Sting, keeping an eye on their potential new member. Schiavone tells us that we will have a tournament for the WCW Women's Championship belt, and they have it on the announce table, so we can see that it actually does exist.
Don't get used to it. You won't see it often.
No, you will not. And they also tell us that Bischoff is not here because he is in Portland negotiating a contract with Roddy Piper, and we will hear by the end of the night whether he signs the contract or not.
It's very exciting.
But for the women's title, it's kind of funny that they're doing this because really the only woman that we know that is contracted to the WCW right now is Medusa.
Uh-huh. And the other woman they have, Deborah, not a wrestler at this point.
Woman, Miss Elizabeth. But anyways, we will go to the first match, and it features the legendary Brad Armstrong versus Marcus Bagwell with Scotty Riggs. And throughout this match, there are some more NWO chants, so the propaganda seems to be working.
Yeah, the propaganda, I guess too.
Sometimes it works.
Marcus Bagwell was a bit sloppy. There's one point where Brad's on the outside, and then Marcus Bagwell jumps over the top rope on them, and it looks like he puts all of his body weight on poor old Brad, and I think his head hits the mat. As the match continues on after that, you can tell something's up with Brad here.
How dare you, Marcus Bagwell? How dare you?
I do have to give credit here. We got not one, but two certified scoops. It starts with the exchange. Brad Armstrong delivers a really well executed scoop slam on Marcus Bagwell. And then Marcus Bagwell decides to pick old Brad up, and then he scoop slam him. And I'm just going to say it. Marcus Bagwell at this time is doing some of the finest scoop slams, power slams, body slams I've seen. The form is just perfect. And you don't really think about that with Buff,
No, you sure don't.
So I got to give him credit. I know you're listening, Buff.
And then the finish of this match was pretty good looking. It's a finish where Bagwell and Armstrong are kind of running the ropes repeatedly, and they eventually crash into each other with cross bodies, and then Bagwell is able to land on top of Brad Armstrong for the win. A good looking finish.
You read that. People didn't like it, but I thought it was fun. Brad Armstrong, we can't speak highly enough of Brad Armstrong. Never got the credit he was due. We're going to say that every time we talk about him.
Somebody has to say it, okay? But like you said, this was a pretty good match. By the way, the time for this is 7 minutes, 27 seconds.
Yeah, pretty long for a Nitro match.
Yep, and I liked it. I gave it a 3 out of 5. I know you don't rate them.
Yeah, I don't rate them, but it's definitely one I wouldn't mind watching again for sure.
No, but we'll move on from Mr. Brad Armstrong, and we will go to the second match, and it is Diamond Dallas Page versus Ice Train with Teddy Long. Ice Train hasn't been on Nitro in a while. This is his first match since September 16th, which was against DDP, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was the one with the towel.
But when DDP comes out, the announcers talk about how they think that Diamond Dallas Page is going to be the next member of the NWO, and it's mostly because he is neighbors to Erich Bischoff and also has a history with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. I guess there is a reasonable suspicion there.
And DDP at this point is still heel.
Yes, he is. But throughout this match, of course, Teddy Long is here, and wouldn't you know it, Nick Patrick is the ref, so we continue their feud. They bicker throughout the whole match, but at one point, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall come out, and they show off their new tag team titles, and then they leave, so I guess they just wanted to show that off. And that just also was feeding into is DDP going to join them or not? But for the match, we see DDP has a spinning neck breaker, and he goes for the pin, and this is a repeat spot, but last time it was with Craig Pittman, where Pittman had pushed DDP off the pin, and he landed on Nick Patrick. Well, this time Ice Train pushes DDP off and he lands on Nick Patrick again. So Nick Patrick, he accosts DDP, and DDP tells him he didn't do it. And while this is happening, this allows Ice Train to get control of the match, and he has some nice power spots.
I like his splash, man. He gets a lot of height on that.
His power slam is pretty good too. But then Ice Train clotheslines DDP out of the ring, and Nick Patrick goes to check on DDP, and this is when the Outsiders come back out, and they hit Ice Train with the tag titles, and Teddy Long tries to tell Nick Patrick what just happened, but of course, Nick Patrick isn't believing a word of it. But the odd thing is, by the time the Outsiders walk out, Ice Train is already back up, which is really weird considering he just got knocked out with the title.
I wonder if that was planned.
Yeah, so after that, DDP hits a diamond cutter for the win. But you just don't normally see someone get hit by the title and then get back up. But afterwards, DDP tells the camera that the diamond cutter is the best finish in wrestling today. But this match was okay. Nothing spectacular. It was 6 minutes and 34 seconds. We're just trying to continue some storylines here. Nothing crazy. But let's go over to Raw and see what they got going on. We opened the show with Kevin Kelly. He is live outside of Brian Pillman's home, and he tells us that he will conduct a live interview with Pillman later tonight. And remember, the hook for this episode is that last week, Austin said he would be here at Pillman's house. And if you know the history, you know exactly what episode this is. And if you don't, you'll find out.
When we got to this and I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, finally. I've never seen this episode.
But the opening match is Goldust with Marlena, and also he is accompanied by Triple H, Mr. Perfect, Crush versus The Stalker with Mark Mero, Rocky Maivia, and Mark Henry as well. And this is because Survivor Series is coming up and they are on the same team for Survivor Series. So technically, this is Rocky Maivia's debut, isn't it? He's not in a match, but his first time coming out.
Yeah.
There you go. November 4th, 1996, The Rock's debut.
Disclaimer. We're not counting. I don't know if he technically debuted on house show or whatever. We're not counting that, okay?
Yeah, so Raw debut, we'll just say that. And also, it should be noted that the Stalker no longer has the face paint, but we are still calling him the Stalker and not Barry Windham.
Yeah.
But during this match, though, we also go back to Doc Hendricks. He tells us that he has talked to Stone Cold, who says he is on the way to Brian Pillman's house. And Doc says he's on the phone with him right now. And we hear Austin. He says he is going after Pillman because he took his interview time and tried to turn it into a shrine to worship Bret Hart. And then Austin tells us a new Bible verse.
Austin 25-17. I will strike down upon your ass with great vengeance and furious anger.
Austin probably rewatched Pulp Fiction.
And then Austin ends with saying he would do anything to get his hands on Pillman, and he would do them regardless of the consequences. After this, we did get a nice advertisement for the upcoming Stone Cold Bret Hart match as a Survivor Series. These are some good.
Oh, that's a really good video. Those videos for their Survivor Series match are really well done.
Yep, very well done. But for this match, of course, the Lumberjacks get involved and both teams go brawl against each other, causing a disqualification. We do get to see Rocky Maivia do a diving crossbody to Crush and Goldust, and eventually both teams are separated. Not very exciting match, but it wasn't meant to be. It's just more to advertise that Survivor Series match. This match was mainly a backdrop to the Stone Cold situation. That's mainly what took the focus. But after this match, we go back to Doc Hendricks, and he is plugging the card for Survivor Series, and he is mostly talking about the upcoming Undertaker vs. Mankind match, where Paul Bearer will be in a shark cage. This leads into some footage from WWF's Big Bang Boom tour, where Mankind tells The Undertaker that at Survivor Series, The Undertaker will have wished he would have remained buried alive. The Undertaker interrupts him over the PA system and says,
"The reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated."
And then we see a black box being lowered to the shark cage, and the executioner takes the cover off of the shark cage, and we see a dummy of Paul Bearer hanging upside down in the cage. And of course, this scares the bejesus out of Paul Bearer.
It looks really funny, the Paul Bearer doll they have in there. Because it's not like the realistic one they had for like Diesel.
Yeah, it's cheap, but I mean, the point was to show Paul Bearer, you're going in this cage.
Yeah.
But let's go back over to Nitro, where we have Scotty Riggs with Marcus Bagwell versus Dean Malenko, and this is for the Cruiserweight title. Yeah, when they announced that, I was like, there's no way Scotty Riggs is a Cruiserweight, right? But the announcers do try to cover this up. They say that Riggs has lost some weight after his injury from the NWO attack, but the announcers say that Riggs barely made the weight. The point is, I don't buy that he's a Cruiserweight.
No, not at all.
But during this match, we see Six out in the crowd. He is obviously interested in the Cruiserweight title, so he's doing some scouting. But then we go back to the match. We see Riggs go to the top rope, but Malenko is able to pull down the rope, which causes Riggs to crash down into the edge of the ring. It looked like a hard landing, and he looked kind of like a doofus doing it, but...
Take a look at Marcus Bagwell.
Yeah, he looks so disappointed. He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he puts his arms up like what was that? Or like, what are you doing? So clearly they're having some issues, Riggs and Bagwell.
To further play into that, right after Riggs crashes to the outside, Bagwell rolls Riggs back into the ring, and it rolls him right into a cradle pin from Malenko, and Malenko picks up the victory. Afterwards, Riggs is upset at Bagwell, and Bagwell tries to explain to Riggs that he was trying to help him. It didn't look like it to me.
No, it looked like he was frustrated. I was like, get your ass in there.
But the two men are somewhat able to settle things for now, and we see them high-five each other as we go to commercial. So clearly we're teasing some dissension between them. So it looks like we're going to have a future breakup here for the American males. After a commercial break, we come back to Nitro, and Tony Giovanni recaps Mongo's attack on Eddie Guerrero last week. They tell us that because of the attack, Eddie will not be here, but Benoit will be facing a member of his family tonight. We're going to find out right now who that is. We have Chris Benoit with woman versus Eddie's older brother, Hector Guerrero. And this is the first time I have ever seen Hector Guerrero wrestle.
Yep. That's the first time you've ever seen him wrestle?
Yep. If anyone wants to know who Hector Guerrero is, he also infamously played the Gobbledygooker.
The Gook.
So that's his claim to fame. And he does look, he's a dead ringer for Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, he looks like Eddie Guerrero just with a mop head.
Yep. So you can certainly see the resemblance. But also we see the Giant is watching the match from the crowd, and he is still holding the U.S. title, even though he hasn't won it. He's taking it hostage. We also get a Kevin Sullivan pre-recorded video, and Jimmy Hart is there as well. Jimmy Hart tells Chris Benoit that he will find out what kind of man Kevin Sullivan is. Sullivan says that he is going to give it to Benoit. But for the match, Hector Guerrero has some nice moves, such as a springboard to Benoit on the outside. I thought that looked really good.
Women basically interrupts by pulling Hector Guerrero's hair.
The thing is with woman, though, when she does that, she has to reach way into the ring to do it. How did the ref not
Ref
see
had
this?
to have seen it. Hector, of course, starts yelling at woman, and then he gets rolled up by Benoit for the 1, 2, 3, which is crazy because this match goes almost 10 minutes. This is with a wrestler that hasn't been on your programming. This is his first Nitro match, and then he goes almost 10 minutes, and Benoit had to win by a roll-up after distraction. I don't get the booking for this match.
No, he should have won decisively, but this was a good match. I will say that.
I don't
didn't think it
mind
was
the
bad.
distraction. It's just a roll-up versus like maybe doing a German doing the headbutt. Like something, a decisive pinfall, not roll-up against Hector Guerrero.
No, we're not going to see Hector around too much. We'll see him again.
We'll see him in April.
Bang. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with Hector Guerrero. I can see he carries the name well. But this leads into an interview with Jeff Jarrett, Chris Benoit, and Mongo McMichael. Jeff Jarrett says they are down but not out. Benoit interrupts Jarrett and says any business pertaining to the Horseman will be dealt with accordingly by a Horseman. So he's saying that Jarrett is not a Horseman. They don't like that Ric Flair just kind of said he's good to go. He didn't really earn it. Mongo says he doesn't see how anyone can come in and buy their way in like Jeff Jarrett did. And he tells Jarrett that as far as he is concerned, this 4 Horseman interview is over. And then Benoit and Mongo leave. Then Jarrett continues on saying the WCW has to unite to beat the NWO. And then we cut to a shot of Sting watching on. And Jarrett tells Roddy Piper to come back and see if he still has it. And then Jarrett somehow must know that Sting is around because he says that when Double J says he is going to do something, he does it every time, unlike Sting. I don't think Sting's going to take too kindly to that.
Yeah, he says Sting dropped the ball as well. And they cut to Sting, and Sting's reaction is like, this motherfucker right here. This guy.
He's like, oh, I got something for your ass.
Mm-hmm. He's like, all right.
Jarrett ends the promo by saying, one way or another, the NWO is going down, and that is not a threat, it's a promise. But let's go to the 5th match for Nitro, where we get the first match of the women's tournament, and it is Reina Jabuki versus Medusa. But when Medusa comes out, they spared no expense on her entrance, which would be great if they hadn't ruined her push already.
I know, right? Reina Jabuki, that's Akira Hokuto. She's wearing a mask.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. They couldn't just have Akira Hokuto be in there?
I guess they put her in this mask. This was a character she played. I did some research. This character she played in CMLL, and she held the women's title there. Apparently, CMLL was not comfortable with her using this gimmick in WCW, and she was stripped of their belt for it. So basically, she is in this tournament twice. Once as Reina Jabuki and once as Akira Hokuto. So she got 2 shots.
Well, we'll see if she wins it. The announcers do spend some time talking about a Japanese female wrestler named Zero. They say she is one of the most famous wrestlers in the world, and I'm sorry if I'm uneducated American. I was unfamiliar with her, so I did not know who they were talking about. But for the match, it's a short match, 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Jabuki gets a Northern Lights suplex, but Medusa eventually wins the match with a German suplex.
With the bridge.
And then afterwards, Medusa tells Zero that she is going to kick her butt back to Japan.
And you won't see that match.
No, I would say we never see it. But yeah, I mean, they didn't really give this match any time for it to be anything special.
They didn't give this tournament any time. Most of the matches for this tournament, you don't see. It's crazy.
So now let's move over back to Raw, where we go back to Brian Pillman's house. Kevin Kelly asks Pillman about the prognosis on his leg, and Pillman says he has an excellent prognosis for 1997. When he said that,
You're like,
yeah, because unfortunately he does die in 1997. So
I think in October or something.
Yeah, but Pillman continues on, and he tells Austin that there's a fine line between business and life, and Austin crossed it. He says Austin made it personal, and now they are operating under a different set of rules now. And he also tells Austin that he is a dead man, and once Austin 316 meets Pillman 9mm Glock, he will send Austin's ass straight to hell. I like that line.
Mm-hmm. It was good. I'm like, wow, a fucking gun. You know the network got on WWE's ass for this.
Yeah, WWE got a lot of trouble for this. We'll explain it more later. But yes, the appearance of a gun was certainly something you don't see in wrestling every day. But this just shows you how desperate WWF was at this time, because they were trying to anything just to pop a rating, and it doesn't work out.
Anything just to get talked about, apparently. Because this, I don't think a gun's going to pop a rating, but it will get you talked about.
After a commercial break, we go to Brian Pillman's house, and we see Stone Cold has arrived because we see him beating up Brian Pillman's friends outside the house. He proceeds to throw one of them in a kiddie pool, and he gives them a proper ass whipping.
He wedges some dude's head between a car door. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, he does. He messes these guys up. We then see Austin approach the front door of Pillman's house, and he tries to open it, but the door is obviously locked. So he goes to the side of the house as we go back to Raw.
We interrupt that exciting development to bring you the Sultan versus Alex the Pug Porto.
Yep, isn't that exciting? We'll go ahead, and we're not going to waste your time.
Let's just go straight to the finish, yeah.
The Sultan wins with a camel clutch, and then afterwards he throws Pug out of the ring like the piece of trash that he is.
The match only goes 2 minutes, so it's, I think Vince even knows, hey, no one's going to give a shit about this match.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be believable after we saw Austin at the house, to wait 10, 15 minutes to go back to it, so I'm glad they didn't. So after this, we go back to Brian Pillman's house. We see Austin break the glass on the window, lets himself in the house, and we see Austin approach Pillman, and we see Pillman aim his 9mm at Austin as the feed cuts out and we go to commercial. This was what got WWF into trouble here. Big trouble. They got a ton of complaints about this because this is probably a bit too real to be putting on wrestling TV.
Of course. So I feel like they could have done this whole Austin gets into Brian Pillman's house without the gun, and it would have been almost as compelling,
For sure. He could have done like the Triple H and Randy Orton.
But apparently, USA considered dropping WWE television. And then WWF agreed to tone things a little down, which, of course, they ramped that back up not too long later in the Attitude Era.
But we'll go back to Nitro. We have our sixth match of the night is in Wall Street versus Chris Jericho. And look, this minute goes 6 minutes, 47 seconds. But if you've seen any Wall Street matches at this point,
they all the same.
Chris Jericho wins with a small package.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rotundo, but I swear to God, at this point in your career, all your WCW matches are the same. It is you doing the abdominal stretch, grabbing the rope, do this thing where the ref is like, hey, are you grabbing the rope? You're like, I'm not grabbing the rope. Then you grab the rope again. Hey, you grabbing the rope? Nah. And then the ref finally catches you.
We get a few chin locks, too.
Oh, yeah, we get a few chin locks. Who can't forget the chin locks? But it was very irritating.
But let's go back where we have an interview with Nick Patrick and his annoying lawyer. Jericho comes out and he tells them that everyone knows that there's nothing wrong with Nick Patrick's neck and that he's a paid employee of the NWO. This is the second time that Jericho has made this accusation in front of Nick Patrick's lawyer. And then Mr. Attorney here tells Jericho that Jericho's wall, that's interesting phrasing there, but he says Jericho's wall looks to be tumbling down, and he asks Jericho about his father, mentioning him being a hockey goon. Jericho's father in real life was a hockey player. I don't know if he was good or not, but he was a hockey player.
He's good enough they keep mentioning him and that he was a hockey player.
Teddy Long comes out after that, and he says Nick Patrick did nothing about the NWO attack on Ice Train earlier tonight, and he also accuses Nick Patrick of being with the NWO. The camera cuts to Ted DiBiase and Vincent in the crowd, and we also see a fan who has a Hogan toy, and he has a noose around his neck. It just was a funny visual seeing a fan hanging Hulk Hogan, and they showed it on TV. But Mr. Attorney here tells Teddy Long that a few years ago, Teddy Long was a ref, and he was suspended, which was true, true. Teddy Long does get mad about this and he mutters some words, but Jericho saves him. And Jericho says everyone has mistakes in their past, but they are talking about the present. And then he accuses Nick Patrick of being part of a premeditated plan to destroy WCW. And then the segment just kind of ends.
Yeah, it just kind of is really odd.
Yeah, this was sort of a rehash of last week's segment. We didn't really gain any new ground. We did the same thing last week, the same exact thing. So we didn't really advance anything. And again, this lawyer character sucks.
He's annoying.
We'll go over to Raw where we have a interview with Psycho Sid and Shawn Michaels. This is a podium style interview and Jim Ross is the mediator here. Jim Ross asks Shawn if he forgives Sid for powerbombing him twice last year. Shawn says he does and he mentions that he was the one that helped Sid get out of the loony bin a few months ago. And Shawn also tells Sid that he is going to go down against the Heartbreak Kid and he says he beat Sid once and he can do it again. But Sid says even Jimmy the Greek will look at Sid and say he is the favorite because he has all the ability. Shawn tells Sid that all of Sid's ability will be his downfall, and he tells Sid that he isn't in his league. Sid says the belt will be around his waist and he guarantees it. And then Shawn doesn't like that, so he breaks his podium and then both men get into each other's face. And they start pushing each other as Jim Cornette comes out with Owen Hart, British Bulldog, and Vader. Cornette starts shit-talking Shawn Michaels and Sid, and Owen Hart comes in, sneaks, and hits Sid in the back with a chair. But Shawn then grabs the chair from Owen Hart, and he chases away Camp Cornette with that chair. But Psycho Sid gets up, and he sees Shawn holding the chair, and it appears Sid thinks Shawn is the one who hit him. Shawn says it wasn't him, and they appear to be close to blows, but then Camp Cornette gets into the ring, and Shawn and Sid make quick work of them, and then they get right back into each other's face, and they had to be separated by officials. I was fine with this segment, but the ending didn't make too much sense to me with Sid and Shawn looking like they're about to fight. Why would Camp Cornette jump in there to kind of
I know, right? That's what I thought too. I was like, you think they would want that, but whatever.
Exactly. So that part I didn't like. The rest of it was fine. And then after that, we replay the Pillman moment from earlier. And Vince tells us that he does not have an update on the situation yet. Thanks, Vince. All right, so we're up to the main event of Raw. So let me go ahead and go to the last match for Nitro before the main event stuff there. It is Booker T with Sister Sherry versus Lex Luger. This is a rematch of last week's Nitro that ended in a countout when Luger chased after Sting in the crowd. So we get a redo here. When Luger comes out, we do see also a Luger pre-recorded video. Luger says he doesn't know what Sting is doing these days, and he says he has left voicemails to Sting, but still no answer. Luger says he hopes the NWO's recruitment of Sting will fall on deaf ears, and he tells Sting that all he asks for is a chance to get face-to-face with him so he can talk with him. And then Heenan speculates that Sting is joining the NWO because he used to wear bright, vibrant colors, and now he is wearing black and white. That's not bad reasoning there, Bobby Heenan. But then after that, Tony Schiavone takes a dig at the WWF and he says the WCW is the place to be and they are on the hour that made others run away. And this is referencing the WWF's recent move from moving from the 9 o'clock hour to the 8 o'clock hour start time. But for this match, the crowd seems to love every move that Luger hits, and Luger does hit a beauty of a running power slam, and Luger hits a series of clotheslines and follows that up with another power slam. And then Luger goes for the torture rack, but Booker T is able to grab the ropes, so Luger has to let go, and then Booker T is able to then hit the Harlem sidekick. Colonel Parker comes running out to the ring, and Booker T goes to taunt the crowd, and while he is taunting, he sees Colonel Parker on the apron. Booker T goes up to him, telling him he doesn't want him to be there, so they start arguing, and Luger capitalizes on this situation, and he sneaks a pin on Booker T for the win. This match was okay, but it's a shame that we have not seen the torture rack the past 2 weeks, so I'm kind of upset by that.
They're edging us.
But we'll go ahead and go to the main event of Raw, where it is Mark Romero with Sable versus fake Razor Ramon with fake Diesel. During this match, Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Mr. Perfect come out to ringside as we go to commercial. And then after the commercial break, where we get an update on the Pillman situation, we are talking to someone at the Pillman house. I don't know exactly who it is. He tells us that they don't know what's going on, and he says the house is totally dark and no one got out of the house yet, but he says he heard a couple things that sounded like gunshots, and they are trying to fix the feed, but they don't want to leave the truck that they're in. They're just too spooked to go out. We then hear somebody away from the phone, and the call just ends. So we're wondering if something else has happened, but we don't know yet. Mero goes for the wild thing, but Triple H pushes Mero off of the top rope. Mr. Perfect distracts the ref, and Fake Razor then is able to hit the Razor's Edge on Mero for the win.
Is this a burial? Losing the Fake Razor?
Yeah, the former Intercontinental Champion just lost to Fake Razor, Ramon. That's something. That is a terrible decision to get this man who, let's see, he debuted at WrestleMania, so this is, his 8th month in the company, and you just buried him with this Fake Razor Ramon? I don't care if Triple H and Mr. Perfect interfered. Mero should not be losing this match.
Yeah, if you're going to have him take an L here, I would have preferred Aldo Montoya or Fake Razor.
Yeah, this was ridiculous, and this is the main event for Raw, so, I mean, this awful stuff here. But after the match, we do go back to Pillman's house, where the feed has miraculously been restored. Kevin Kelly tells us that no one has been shot, and people are trying to restrain Brian Pillman. Austin then appears, and he tries to come after Pillman again, but he gets pushed out of the room by like 5 dudes. And the visual for Raw, when it ends, is we see Brian Pillman's wife crying. So that's a great visual to end Raw on. For the main event of Nitro, we don't have a match. We have a Bischoff phone interview. Bischoff's here to update us on his contract negotiations with Roddy Piper. Bischoff says things are going well, but Piper and management are holding things up. But he says his conversations with Roddy Piper will continue next week. So we're not going to have a resolution on this, even though he said we would. So another bullshit tactic there. But Bischoff wraps it up by saying he hopes things get done because the people want to see the match between Piper and Hogan. But after this, we're still not done because we have plenty of time left on Nitro. We have enough time to where we can once again recap the full Piper return at Halloween Havoc. This took 7 minutes.
Again. I know, they recapped it again.
Yeah, this is like the second time in a row they've done. Actually, it is because 2 Nitros. I'm like, what in the world? But Nitro officially ends with the NWO promo. Hogan comes out. He's in a good mood. He tells the back once again to dim the lights and hit him with that Hollywood spotlight. Hogan starts talking about something called the Cable Ace Awards, and he tells Ted Turner that he didn't get an invite to the awards, and he tells Turner that Hogan has made him what he is today, and if Hogan doesn't win the Cable Ace Award, then he will crash the party and take Ted Turner's away from him. He really wants that damn award. Hogan then moves on to more relevant stuff, and he tells Piper that he, Hogan, put on the greatest acting job of his career to go to Roddy Piper. That's a different take than what I saw Hogan. I don't think you're that good of an actor with your record in Hollywood. Before Hogan continues on, I did read this online, that during Nitro, they did play a clip of Hogan's movie, Santa with Muscles. They do not show that on a WWE Network, thankfully. But Hogan continues on, saying he did everything he could to get to Roddy Piper, and he calls him the man who wears a miniskirt. But Hogan tells Piper that he has no heart, and Piper is actually scared to wrestle Hogan. Hogan says you can probably find Piper and Macho Man at their favorite rest home somewhere, and Hogan ends his part with saying he is the master and he will be the NWO champion for life. Ted DiBiase gets on the mic and he hypes up Hollywood Hogan as Hollywood Hogan ends it with yet another pose off. As far as the ending, it was fine. You know, you get to see the narcissistic Hogan. And I did like that he is so narcissistic that he is acting like he was faking it at the end of the pay-per-view, even though we all know he wasn't.
It does work for the Hogan gimmick, though.
But that is it for Nitro. This is a better episode of Nitro this week than last. A lot of the matches were pretty decent. And compared to Raw, I mean, this is in a different league almost. But to recap, Raw this week felt like filler outside of the Austin.
Yeah, it was. Here is Stone Cold and Brian Pillman, and then here's a bunch of matchups that you don't give 2 shits about. Goldust for Stalker, Sultan versus Alex Porto, and then Mark Mero Fake Razor. Those 3 matches wouldn't even go on my dark match list, much less on my episode of Tape Television. Awful. If the Austin stuff wasn't in this would be one of the all-time stinkers.
So we will see after we get done with Nitro if WWF's desperate ploy for ratings works out. But yeah, and the only other thing notable on the show was the Sid Shawn promo exchange.
Yeah.
So for me, clear, easy, decisive victory for Nitro this week.
Yeah, I would agree. So last week was a 3.6 to 2 in Nitro's favor. This week's 3.4 to 2.3. So that Pillman gun stunt got you 0.3.
I hope it was worth it.
Well, let's see what happens next week. We got to see what happens next week. See if it maybe hearing about it at the water cooler made people interested.
We'll see. Tune in next week and we'll find out.